Operation Al-Aqsa Flood and its implications. On October 7, 2023, the Izz ad-Din al-Qassam brigades, the military wing of Hamas, announced the launch of a large-scale military operation called Al-Aqsa Flood, targeting Israeli military sites and settlements surrounding the Gaza Strip. The operation involved the firing of a large number of rockets, as well as the infiltration of armed groups into areas under Israeli control by land, sea, and air, resulting in casualties and the capture of Israeli soldiers and civilians. In response, Israel declared a state of war and launched a counter-military operation known as Iron Swords, which included intensive air, land, and naval strikes on the Gaza Strip. The ensuing hostilities led to a large number of Palestinian civilian casualties, widespread destruction of infrastructure and residential areas, and the displacement of large segments of the population. This round of confrontation differs from previous ones in terms of the nature of the battlefield. For the first time on a large scale, hostilities shifted from inside the Gaza Strip to areas under Israeli control, particularly the so-called Gaza envelope, which serves as a buffer zone and Israel's first line of defense vis-à-vis Gaza. This breach is widely viewed as a qualitative shift in the pattern of engagement between the two sides. From a strategic perspective, the operation exposed weaknesses in Israel's early warning and rapid response systems and raised questions about the effectiveness of previously adopted security policies. At the same time, it demonstrated an evolution in the armed factions' capabilities in terms of planning, execution, and operational coordination. Politically, the developments brought the Palestinian-Israeli conflict back to the center of international attention and increased diplomatic and humanitarian pressure related to conditions in Gaza. They also reopened debates about political settlement pathways, the limits of military force in managing the conflict, and the future of regional stability. Overall, this round represents a turning point in the dynamics of the conflict in terms of the level of escalation, the nature of confrontation, and the breadth of its regional and international repercussions, making it likely to reshape the rules of engagement and political security balances in the coming phase. Nature of the operation and general context. Available evidence suggests that the scale, coordination, and timing of the October 7th operation were unprecedented, which was reflected in the magnitude and nature of Israel's subsequent military response. In both form and impact, the operation represents a qualitative shift, as it involved for the first time since 1948, a large-scale penetration into areas inside the Green Line, rather than being confined to border or disputed zones. The operation can be understood within a cumulative framework of political, security, and economic factors, including the continued economic and humanitarian deterioration in the Gaza Strip due to the long-standing blockade, accompanied by declining living standards and basic services. Ongoing violations and tensions in Jerusalem, particularly around the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound, with its high religious and political symbolism. The declining political and security role of the Palestinian Authority as a result of Israeli policies aimed at marginalizing and weakening its influence. The intensification of Israeli military operations in the West Bank, including incursions, arrests, house demolitions, land confiscation, and settlement expansion. The regional context, especially attempts to revive normalization and regional settlement initiatives, which were perceived by resistance factions as a threat to marginalize or internationalize the Palestinian issue. In this sense, the operation does not appear to be linked to a single immediate event, but rather represents the culmination of long-term political, security, and social accumulations.
Military and security implications. The operation revealed shortcomings in Israeli early exiting and response systems and showed the ability of Palestinian factions to conduct complex operations beyond the traditional pattern of limited rocket exchanges. It also raised questions about mutual deterrence and the limits of military and technological superiority in preventing unexpected attacks. In response, Israel sought through its subsequent campaign to regain the initiative and increase the cost of conflict for Hamas, relying on strong political and military support from international partners, particularly the United States, under the framework of the right to self-defense. Political and negotiation dimension. The issue of hostages and prisoners represents a central element in the calculations of both sides. For Palestinian factions, it constitutes a potential bargaining chip in any future negotiations. For Israel, it remains a top priority within its military and political agenda. Politically, the operation brought the Palestinian cause back to the forefront of international attention after a period of relative decline and reconnected it to broader regional and global geopolitical rivalries rather than limiting it to a purely security framework. Impact on the internal Palestinian scene. The developments strengthened the standing of armed resistance factions within Palestinian public opinion, while the Palestinian Authority has faced a growing crisis of legitimacy linked to the failure of the peace process and the persistence of the status quo without a political horizon. And at the same time, Hamas faces major challenges in light of Israel's efforts to impose lasting structural changes on Gaza's security, administrative, and demographic reality, leaving the future trajectory of the conflict open to multiple scenarios. The Al-Aqsa Flood operation constitutes a major turning point in the Palestinian-Israeli conflict in terms of escalation, the nature of confrontation, and the scale of its regional and international effects. It reflects a transition toward a more complex phase in which military, political, humanitarian, and geopolitical dimensions are deeply intertwined, making a return to previous patterns of confrontation or traditional settlement pathways increasingly difficult in the foreseeable future.